How's the Detroit Sports Podcast going?
This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, this is Freddie Cohen of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the latest edition of the Doc and Jock podcast. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my cousin, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. What's up, cuz? What's happening?
Actually, I think you should be the one telling us what's happening. What did you do today?
Listen, I spent the first 60 minutes of this morning at Secretary of State renewing my tabs that I should have done back in March.
2.5 months ago.
I had to pay the $25 late fee because of the fact that I did not renew. And here's what happened. I mean, I was going through paperwork because obviously you see when you're driving home all the time, you know, the police pulling people over. And so obviously you do the routine check and you go, okay, make sure I got proof of insurance. I got my registration, because that's what they ask for if you get pulled over. So I look and I go, wait a minute. My birthday rolled around in March and this registration is expired. And the mitigating factor that made me confused was I just got a new lease at the end of January. And my wife told me too. She said, don't they usually, if you get a new car, don't they just add that to the bill and take care of that and get you new tabs and everything situated? I said, honey, what the hell do I know? I have no clue about that. So I'm looking at it and it's expired. And I'm like, wait a minute. They never sent anything in the mail, right, honey? She's like, no, we never got anything. So I've been rolling around town, luckily, for the last 60 days with expired tabs. And this week was nerve-wracking because I was aware of it. I drove back and forth to the office a couple times, and luckily the doc slid clear, baby, because that's a $135 ticket if you get pulled over. So, you were ripping me, Vito's ripping me. Like, how do you run everything so efficiently in your life and you can't get your car tabs taken care of? That's what happens.
Like adult things you're a total hot mess with. Like you run the podcast like a well-oiled machine, right? You're sitting there, you're doing like 5 different shows because you got to be on everybody's shit because that's how you roll. We've talked about this before. You run your own medical office. You run your own business. You run a couple businesses too. It's not just podcasting. It's not just being a shrink. You do a couple different things. And all those things seem to work out just fine. Your real life, you're a total hot mess.
It's a problem.
You're like a garbage can on fire.
See, the problem in life is there's so many different things that you got to take into account, and it's all these variables and questions that makes everything in life so freaking confusing. Like, wait a minute, don't they send it in the mail? Why didn't they send it in the mail? Don't they offer you the opportunity to pay it online, send some information? And then you got to go, wait a minute, is there a problem with our mail? Which is yes. I mean, we got a mailman that we think is either dyslexic or blind or can't, figure out how to hit the target with our numbers and our address. Or you say, okay, why didn't it happen? There's a series of breakdowns that led to it. And then the worst thing is obviously I'm oblivious. I'm just living life and not worrying about the tabs.
I'm oblivious.
I was oblivious to it. I was living my life, going back and forth. And I'm a good driver, so it would have taken, me speeding or something really crazy to cause, an issue. But I'm thankful. I paid the fee, got it over with. I got my tabs, finally back on orange. And the best part was, my wife is like, wait a minute, have you checked the tabs? I'm like, no, I haven't looked in the back of the car in months. She's like, you're supposed to be on orange. I'm like, okay, 2017 is yellow, and the new tabs are orange. So everybody, if you're in May, make sure you change your tabs.
So you got to be on orange. Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
So tell me how this goes, right? Because obviously you weren't able to pay this online. They didn't give you that option. So you had to go in there.
I went to the office.
Generally, when you go in, they do have a machine at the very front. You pay like an extra, I think it's like $250 fee to use the in and out machine.
Yes, there was one there.
You didn't do this. You spent an hour waiting at the Secretary of State.
In Secretary of State for an hour because there were 4 people in line. The lady went and she said, the last time I was here, the machine didn't work. And, lo and behold, she went again and she's like, the machine didn't work. And she went back to the front and got the lady to help out. And I'm like, look, I don't want machines involved in that. I want a human-to-human interaction. Give me the tab so I see it, because you know what would happen is they'd give me the receipt and no tab would pop out.
Right.
And I'd be like sitting there waiting, twiddling my thumbs, and you just the stuff that you're supposed to know, you know, the intricacies of life. That's my biggest weakness, if I were to say I had one, is the little intricacies of life, the nuance that you're supposed to kind of pick up on. Like, hey, you know, tabs, pay it, take care of it. It just kind of goes over my head. And the big stuff I take care of, like paying the bills, making sure the mortgage is, you know, taken care of, the clients. And so basically, you know, long story short is I'm overextended. And the menial tasks of life, you know, I need someone to take care of.
Assistant.
I need a personal assistant to take care of the little stuff.
For $250 a week, I'll give you 25 hours every week of my time, and I'll be your personal assistant.
No doubt about it.
From 6 to, 11, Monday through Friday, whatever you need.
Oh, man.
I'll do it for you.
How was your Memorial Day weekend? Was it all good?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
How'd it shake out for you?
I ended up visiting the wife in Indiana, met some of her coworkers. That was pretty cool. They're all pretty awesome. Drank a little bit, which was fun. And then we ended up going to dinner. And then Sunday, we just kind of laid out by the pool in our apartment complex. And then I had to race home Sunday night because I had to work on Monday. It's what it was. It was cool. It was good enough. What about you? What'd you do?
Yeah, it was cool, and that's why I wanted to ask you about it, in that this Memorial Day was spent on the patio at my house and then hanging out on Monday with my sister. And so what we did was the barbecue thing. A lot of eating, a lot of celebrating, things like that. And so, obviously, naturally, when you're chilling, it's hot, so you're kind of thinking back and forth, and you're on social media looking at what others are doing. And I kind of get a sense that for Memorial Day, it's usually what people do is broken down into two camps. You got those that go to the beach and hang out on the water or on the boat or lakeside or poolside at their friends' or family's condos or personal residences, or they kind of just hang out with family and barbecue. And so I was thinking, man, you know, not that I don't appreciate it, but I kind of was this year going, you know, it was fun to eat and hang out and just to have a couple cocktails, shoot the breeze a little bit with family. But part of me was going, you know what? I would not have minded hanging out on a lake and just chilling, laying out on a beach.
It's because we're in a heat wave right now.
Exactly.
Normally, it's not this warm.
So if you had the option of spending, you know, 2 days like we just had over Memorial Day, would you rather go to the beach, or would you rather just hang out with the crew, drinking at your own personal residence, having a barbecue?
If it was as hot as it's been the last couple days, beach all day. If it's just normal, if it's like Memorial Day is almost every year, like 9 times out of 10, I'll take the barbecue. You can kind of just lounge around your backyard. You can get as drunk as you want. You can wake up with no pants on and nobody's going to yell at you. It'll be totally okay.
And then the one drawback with going to the beach is you got to worry about, you know, sunscreen, making sure you don't burn and things like that.
That's the hard part, right? See, if you're on the patio or if you're like laying out by the pool, you can control how much sun you get. When you're on the beach, good luck. I mean, unless you're taking an umbrella that's like 10 feet in diameter, how are you going to find shade? It's not there. So you end up getting burnt your first time out for the year. I mean, you're going out there and you're blinding people. You're pasty white. So then you're coming back home red as a lobster. You're going to be uncomfortable for the next week and a half.
Exactly. And the other part, too, is this is where the news comes in and messes everything up. They ran a story in which they said, hey, be careful. Don't get drunk on the boat because there's going to be a lot of police presence. There's going to be a lot of police watching everybody and things like that. And I guess when you drink too much on a boat, you can go slamming into people and things like that. So I'm like, you know what? I don't want to go and end up getting, you know, rammed into by some young ass cat that doesn't know how to control himself and things like that. So what a lot of people do is they park their boat on the dock and just hang out and drink and things like that. So there's one aspect of it, but for me, the comforts of home usually win out. But I was just telling myself, I was thinking, man, it would have been nice just to kind of go out and be around some water. So the discussion has naturally, again, popped up like we've talked about in the podcast, you know, pricing out what a pool would cost, what we would do. And so unfortunately, the landscape of my house was I decided, you know, obviously the comforts of home, I built a huge ass patio to hang out in. But now
You do have a nice patio.
I have a nice patio to hang out in. You can just relax, have some beers and, you know, grill up some food. But at the other end now, too, you got the girls who are just loving the water. And they're like, we want to go to the pool. And so I got them a gym membership where we can do that. But sometimes you look at it and you go, man, you look two houses down and the neighbors are chilling. You know, all the neighbors are friendly except for me. And they're all hanging out. You know, 4 houses down, you can see that they got a nice little pool. And so obviously what would happen is if I got a pool, I would have to basically chop the deck maybe by 30%, and that's an extra fee and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, but maybe if the market continues and the house hits a certain point, just might have to bite the bullet and get a house with a pool.
Pools are nice, man.
They're nice. You can have people over.
So nice.
They are nice, but it's an upkeep too. And I got younger girls, so maybe as my hair becomes more salt and peppery and I get a little bit older,
or falls away.
Or goes away completely. And you look at, well, maybe in the future, I'll look at mixing both, where you can have a nice little patio around with a pool where we can have the crew over and stuff like that. But overall, Memorial Day was cool. It's just one of those things where you do sometimes think about, well, what are other people doing? And they're all, getting on their boards and going on in the ocean and the lakes. And there's a lot of cool lakes around Michigan, let me tell you. And that's what's cool about social media. That's the good part about it, is you get to kind of see what everyone's doing, and it's really fun to put yourself in that scene. But you know what? Nothing really beats the comforts of home.
No,
Nothing,
man,
right?
I totally enjoy just hanging out on the patio,
Gotcha.
drinking a few beers, having a good time, barbecuing something. That's where it's at for me.
Yeah, and then obviously what we do is we go on social media, we read stuff about sports and things like that. Did you get a chance to check out the recent article regarding Johan Franzen? It made news last week in that people have started to kind of question and look at, okay, how has Johan Franzen been doing, because of the notion of that everyone knew that he had serious post-concussion symptoms. He had numerous concussions. Recently, he's entered into a more comprehensive program, I think out there in Utah or Colorado or something like that. Yep, and he is getting extensive mental health treatment, rehabilitation, because his life has, taken a turn for the worse in the last 60 days. And so there was an update regarding Johan Franzen. And that whole situation, when you look at it, has been really traumatic and tough to see, in that the Red Wings committed to Johan Franzen, gave him one of the early massive deals under the new collective bargaining agreement with the salary cap, and unfortunately his career was cut short because of concussion symptoms. And now we get a chance to see, if you read the article, the depths of which the struggle in which he has is really heartbreaking, in that, you and I, we can butt heads, we can, argue back and forth, and then we're done. We go about our day, we go eat our food, butt heads, and then keep it going. Someone like Johan Franzen, if he has an argument with his wife, it lingers for days and days, and then his emotional state will take a significant toll. So he doesn't bounce back from typical things. His lows go lower. He still has headaches. He still is acclimating to life after hockey, and it's just really sad. And the other part I want to talk to you about is hockey is one of the rare sports now that is still not acknowledging the impact of head trauma in the sport. Football's done it. Other contact sports are doing it. Hockey has yet to come out and publicly link CTE with the violence of the game. And they're doing it for a reason. Obviously, they don't want to open it up like the NFL with all that money that the NFL is pumping into it. The NHL, if you read up on it, has not done enough, in my opinion, for the likes of a Johan Franzen and the current players with CTE and head trauma and that relationship that's obviously there.
What are you going to do, though? I don't understand what you can do. I get what you're saying, but I don't understand what you can do. So the NHL has gone ahead and they've established a set of protocols now. You've seen, if you watched Game 1 for the Stanley Cup, Tom Wilson came in and basically blindsided Jonathan Marchessault. He got sent down to the dark room, and it's basically just like the NFL. You go, you sit in a room, you got to do a quick cognitive test, and you have a baseline. If you can meet your baseline, you're allowed to go back out and play. If you can't, you're sidelined. There's not too much the NHL can do. As far as helmet construction, is this what you're talking about? Is this where you're going? Helmet construction?
No. Obviously, in terms of protecting players, that is currently being done now. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is the relationship of former players to CTE and acknowledging that the repeated violence of the game, because Real Sports did a piece, and the way it went down was goons, the players that are not the scorers, the guys that are sent out on the ice to protect other players, the thumpers, the guys that are basically out there to check people.
Stu Grimson's, your Bob Probert, even though he had great hands and could score.
They have shown that they have post-traumatic stress, they have post-concussion symptoms, they have emotional disturbances similar to those that are in the NFL. But hockey hasn't acknowledged it, because then what happens is the moment you acknowledge it, that yes, playing in the NHL, checking has impacted my brain, then there's a financial liability, a tie, so that the NHL doesn't want to open that argument. But it's pretty much known that contact sports, there is a direct relationship with CTE and contact sports, but the NHL has not been willing to maybe even compensate those that sacrificed a lot of their lives to play a sport and help build a league. And so that's the part that struggles. The part that is the influencer is money. And that's the shitty part about it, that story, is that obviously the NHL doesn't want to pay a bunch of money to former athletes, But in the end, it's going to be proven. It's going to be shown that, this current wave of players, probably the likes of Sidney Crosby and those players that have repeated concussions, it's going to be shown that playing the sport of hockey is going to be impactful, even possibly negatively on your brain. And at some point, then the NHL will be similar to the NFL, because the NFL has a fund, and they, the former players sued. And there is a huge fund now available for some players to try and get to help with their life after hockey. And that's the point now, is that some ex-players are suffering, and the NHL has done not as much as many people would like in terms of post-concussion symptoms.
There's a great movie on Netflix. It's called Ice Guardians. It deals with a lot of what you're talking about.
Yes.
Go check that out. It's totally awesome if you haven't seen it. Yeah, I can see that, and I kind of agree with what you're saying there. As far as Johan Franzen's concerned, though, this doesn't just sound like it was simple concussion issues or things that were related to concussions. I mean, this might be the fallout from all the concussions that he sustained in his career, but it really sounds like he has some depression issues. There are some other mental health things that are going on here, as well as, like you said, the post-concussion syndrome that he's dealing with. His case specifically, it's kind of dire, and I think it was really interesting and really brave for his wife to come out and kind of detail what he goes through on a day in, day out basis, just because these are all things. I don't know about you. I hang out with a lot of guys that play hockey, so we always make jokes about Johan Franzen's head, about how it's fragile, right? I mean, it's just what you do when you're in a locker room. There's no other place there's no other place that is like more fun than a hockey locker room, and no other place in the world that is more distasteful than a hockey locker room. So yeah, we end up making jokes about Johan Franzen and his head and how he's fragile. It's what it is, okay? So now after all of this, you kind of look back and you kind of feel bad about it. You know what I'm saying? We do have a heart, right? But you're just kind of like, wow, like he is dealing with a ton right now, an absolute ton. As far as the NHL goes with concussions and CTE, while I think you have a point where they haven't really come out and acknowledged it, like the NFL wouldn't have acknowledged it until they were forced to. Do you know what I'm saying?
And they also, in reading here online, they won't fund concussion research. They won't add to the pie. The NFL, UFC, other contact sports are funding studies and things like that. The NHL is not putting any funds into that. And that's a problem, because when players look at it, you go, well, do you care about me as a person? Do you care about my well-being? Do you care about the future generation of young athletes? Because even though investigations may take place into the relationship, if they find something maybe that can be preventative, if there's something going on in research, NHL dollars could be definitely utilized to help further the cause. And when you don't acknowledge it and you don't start with it, then you look at it and you go, why? Why is it not? Why are you not protecting your players? Why are you not willing to, enhance the future of your league? Is it because of the fact you're scared of lawsuits? Is it because of the fact that you don't want to acknowledge the serious ramifications of playing? Because that's what the NFL is facing, is that when you realize, well, there is a risk inherently when you play this kind of rough sport, other maybe younger kids don't want to play. You then impact, at the smaller level, the grassroots hockey leagues and things like that. So it's a complicated issue, but at the very least, at least put in some money for studies and research and things like that, and kick in some funds for ex-players that are struggling, like a Johan Franzen. But that story was just so devastating, in that you see a guy that you rooted for, you see somebody that, dedicated his life to hockey, and his career was cut short. He was the preeminent power forward at the time, and he helped the Red Wings significantly. He was the guy that would stand in front of the net, a premier power forward. He was a guy that just had the knack, Johan Franzen, of putting the puck in the net, and he was a beast. And the Red Wings decided, and whether you agreed with it or not, the Red Wings invested in Johan Franzen over Amirian Hossa, and that's what it was. But unfortunately, due to the nature of his injuries, it just didn't work out. His career was cut short, and now he's struggling to get back to normal life. And you hope that these treatments, these extensive treatment programs, can be covered and doesn't ruin his family financially.
Hopefully he can get the help that he needs, and hopefully this new round of treatment will help him. It's unfortunate that it's come to this for him. Do you know what I'm saying? And I remember Johan Franzen getting hit, and I remember him dealing with his first bouts of concussion and concussion syndrome, but I don't ever remember, how, so I remember Sidney Crosby getting hit, and you seen him get hit, and he was out of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he couldn't skate. I don't ever remember Johan Franzen getting hit like that. I don't ever remember it being such a bone-jarring, such a brutal hit. You know, like I remember Paul Correa getting laid out by Eric Lindros and getting, or was it Scott Stevens? By Scott Stevens. He was skating through the Scott Stevens killed everybody.
Neutral zone.
Eric Lindros, and he killed Paul Correa. He was getting ready to cross over the blue line, and Scott Stevens just lined him up and laid him out.
Bam.
And Paul Correa laid there on the ice, and just nothing was moving. Like, he wasn't even breathing. His chest wasn't even going. And then all of a sudden, you see this air, just like this plume of air just come out of his nose and partially out of his mouth. And, like, he was wearing a visor, and it just fogged up. And you were like, oh, God, thank goodness he's alive. It was the scariest thing you've ever seen. And the concussions cut Paul Correa's career short. Eric Lindros was the same way. You know, you've seen Eric Lindros get lined up by Scott Stevens and just basically died there on the ice. And Eric Lindros' issues were he was a big guy, he was strong, he came up through the minor leagues, and he just skated with his head down all the time. And it was something that he could never learn to correct as he played at that next level. So he was always a prime target because he always had his head down looking at the puck. I don't ever remember Johan Franzen just getting lined up and drilled like these guys. So, and look, a concussion, it's kind of like a flick on the balls, right? It doesn't have to be a wallop. It doesn't have to be a punch for it to hurt. Sometimes just getting your nuts grazed or just kind of just tinged a little bit hurts way more than taking a full-on kick to the balls. And no rhyme or reason, it's just the way it hurts sometimes. So I get it that concussions are like that, but I just don't ever remember him getting laid out and just laced up to where years later he's still dealing with all of this fallout and all of these issues, and now he's got to go to Colorado to get specialized treatment for it. It just kind of blows your mind. The brain is a very sensitive organ. It's delicate, man.
Now I'm curious, you and the boys, you would make fun of Johan Franzen, and he's a hometown guy. What would you say about Sidney Crosby? Oh my gosh.
You murder Sidney Crosby. You hate Sidney Crosby.
Exactly.
You're a Red Wing fan, you hate Sidney Crosby.
So what would you say about him?
You don't want him to get up off the ice. You want him to stay down. Go away.
Stay down, pansy?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's more creative words that are used for Sid the Kid, but yeah, no, you don't like Sidney Crosby. So you cut him up. Look, you respect his ability, right? I mean, you've seen it when I've gone back and forth with Justin Rose about it. You respect the guy's ability because he's incredible. He's a talent. The one thing you can say about Sidney Crosby is he cries a lot, and he whines, and he honestly, he looks like a basketball player out there who thinks he's always been fouled, and he's always complaining to the ref, looking for a call, and it just gets annoying. So when a guy sits there and takes a little bit of a liberty with him, lines him up, and knocks him down, you're like, good, you deserve it, stay down, you know?
So right now, at the time of this recording, the Vegas Golden Knights are one game up in the NHL Stanley Cup Finals.
Dude, it was such a good first game,
That was an amazing game, one in which I was thankful to be lucky enough to flip to that game because I wanted to see Ovechkin and I wanted to see the Vegas Golden Knights and see what they were able to do, and it was just a goal fest. Speed galore. It was premier passing, execution. It was just a fun, entertaining sporting event to watch. It, for me, has been better than watching both the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference Finals. I think the Stanley Cup game was at the same time as Houston and Golden State, and I think that was right in the midst of Houston not being able to make 27 straight three-pointers, and so it was just I mean,
building a house with all those bricks.
The NBA playoffs in totality, I was excited for both the Western Conference, Eastern Conference Finals, both games, and both Game 7s. I thought, okay, good, now we can watch some competitiveness. No. The first game of the Stanley Cup Final was way better than both, and I'm thankful I definitely flipped the channel and did not invest too much in the NBA playoffs, no doubt about it. But we read a great article on The Athletic, in which you can subscribe by going to theathletic.com/DSP. Craig Custance wrote a great piece in which the Detroit Red Wings can take some pointers from the Vegas Knights in terms of their development and drafting and things like that. What'd you make of the article? Craig Custance, premier writer, did a great job in kind of linking what the Red Wings can do with the draft strategy, especially with a collection of picks right now, to help get them at least competitive to get into the postseason. The Vegas Knights, man, they have done an amazing job in terms of scouting.
I think he did a really good job of laying out what Vegas did and how they went about it. If you look at what Vegas was able to kind of pick from, it's all third and fourth line guys. It's rookies. It's your bottom three defensemen. So you were able to, as Vegas was going through this process and setting this team up, they had kind of slim pickings. Now, I believe the NHL totally set this up and made it feasible for them to be a good team. But if you look at what they had to pick from, it wasn't like they got a top-line center here or there. It wasn't like they got a number one forward or a number one defenseman. You can argue that Marc-Andre Fleury is a number one goaltender, and I think he's a huge reason why this team's been playing so well. He's the one guy on this team that has basically been there, done it, whatever it is. Made it to a Stanley Cup, lost a Stanley Cup, won a Stanley Cup, got pulled during the finals. He's done it all. He's been there, he's done that. He is the guy who has that experience. He's that veteran in the room where he's like, look, guys, never get too high, never get too low. If you watch the way he played in that Winnipeg series, there were fights and scrums going on all around him. He's sitting there giving guys wet willies. That's just funny to me. He's that calm, cool, and collected that there's a brawl breaking out by his crease, and he's like, it's cool. I'm just going to stick my finger in this guy's ear because why not? So the way they put this team together is very interesting. And if you go back to game one, just watch game one, you have a guy like Thomas Nosek. He was a Red Wing. He was a guy who was never going to see the ice. Not this year, and he probably wasn't going to see it next year either.
Why?
This guy had a game-winning goal. On top of it, he had another one that cemented the game for Las Vegas. And it's just because Gerard Gallant sees something in him. It's the way that this team is put together. Look, you got to trust your youth. You got to trust the kids. Gerard Gallant rolls 4 lines nonstop. Thomas Nosek as a fourth-line center, that's what he is, a fourth-line center. You're getting big production from your fourth line. From your fourth-line center scores your game-winning goal. That guy's playing almost 12 minutes a night. Do you know what I'm saying? In Detroit, you're not getting that. You don't have, he's not going to play. You got to trust the kids. It's about doing a rebuild, and you got to hit the restart. And yeah, I get it. The Wings are saddled with really bad contracts. But whose fault is that? That's that general manager who just got a 2-year extension. That's his fault.
And so what many people in the hockey world have said was they saw George McPhee, the general manager of the Golden Knights. They saw him everywhere, from minor league events to USA Hockey. They saw him everywhere. He scoured the country because, if you recall, Vegas was granted a team, but they didn't play for an entire season.
Right.
So he was able to just scour the landscape. And what was he able to do? You also got to remember, he was also instrumental in some of the players that are on the other side. He was affiliated with the Capitals in his former role with them. And so you look at George McPhee, and it goes right back to this. And this is why everyone in Detroit is scared, is that George McPhee was able to identify talent that others didn't want and collectively put them together with a coach that can get it right. And that's the formula. The problem that everybody has, the problem that I have, the thing that makes me nervous and scared is, if Ken Holland scoured the landscape, he might have just said, okay, you know what? I'm going to let Thomas Nosek go, and I'm going to let Mrazek go, and I'm going to let these guys go, and I'm going to select these 11 guys, and they might not be as good as the scouting staffs of others in the NHL. And that's what's going to set you apart, is you got to go out there and identify talent, and talent that's going to fit your system. But is the Red Wings' current system conducive to competitiveness? I mean, did you watch Washington and Vegas? They were skating up and down the ice, banging, executing, passing. They were able to execute at such a high level, and it just seemed like the Red Wings, when they played, didn't it appear that maybe they were a step slow, that they weren't as fast as the rest of the league? They weren't as competitive. And look, what would happen? Scoring droughts. They wouldn't be able to put the puck in the net consistently enough. And they, in the end, they ended up with less than 80 points. It was a disastrous season. And so that's the biggest problem, is that we don't have confidence that Ken Holland can evaluate the current level of NHL talent and build a team in the current state of the NHL. George McPhee was able to do it and did it in 1 year. It could end up being, if the Knights win the Stanley Cup, one of the biggest sports stories of all time, probably even bigger than Leicester City winning the Premier League, which was shocking in and of itself, a club that was not known to being competitive in the Premier League, and they won it all. Vegas Golden Knights, people thought that maybe that team could do something in 5 years. Year one, and they're 1 game up on Washington. It's amazing, and that's where Ken Holland has to step it up and say, okay, I got these draft picks, but cuz we're on the verge, and I don't want to scare you, but we're on the verge. If Ken Holland whiffs on at least 60% of these next draft picks, we're probably talking about you and I in our 50s before the Wings host a cup again. And that's scary to think about, is that a club like the Wings could not be competitive for the cup in another decade if this doesn't go right. That's the level of pressure that Holland has to feel right now is that if you mess this up, we could be talking maybe about 2 decades of futility.
Absolutely. And look,
we're staring it right in the face.
It all falls on Ken Holland to get these next couple draft picks right. You got to start. You have to build that next wave so they can come in and take over for these guys who have these really atrocious contracts. And that was something else Grand Rapids was able, or Las Vegas was able to do. Las Vegas was able to put a team together and keep the salary cap in check. Do you realize their highest paid guy is a Detroit Red Wing? It's Thomas Tatar. He doesn't even see the ice. You know, he's one of their highest paid players, and he's not even making a contribution. What does that say about what your general manager has done? Yeah, cool. You were able to fleece Las Vegas in a trade. Las Vegas had a ton of draft picks because of the expansion draft. So they just basically doled them out like, all right, cool, whatever you want, here you go. We'll take that guy. And Thomas Tatar hasn't been able to get on the ice, at least not consistently. He's one of their highest paid players, and he's not producing. All of that falls at the general manager, George McPhee, because he was able to put a team together and do it with a salary cap structure where you've got guys coming in and they're basically playing on their first contract. Maybe they're playing on their second contract, but all these contracts are kept in check and they're not exorbitant. They're all minimalistic, and it allows you to go forward and to build a team. Not just for this year, not just for next year, but 5-6 years down the road where you can sit there and you can start to lay some roots in the NHL. And now you're a place, you become a destination after 3-4 years of competing at a level where guys want to now come out there and they want to play because, one, it's the Vegas nightlife. Awesome, right? 2, you're a team that this is your first year in the league. Do you realize this is their worst season? Their worst season, and they're 3 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup. That's your worst season.
How do you see it playing out?
It's also your best season.
I'm put you on the spot. What do you think? Do you think Vegas takes it down?
I think so.
7 games at home, Vegas storybook?
I want to say 6 games, Vegas.
Okay.
I think Vegas. Look, Capitals have a really good team. I feel like the Capitals threw everything and the kitchen sink at Las Vegas on Monday night, and still they lost by 2 goals. Now, I understand one of them was an empty netter, but still you lost by 2 goals. You know, and I'll be honest with you. I was watching that game, and I was so nervous laying in bed watching it as it was unfolding, especially the final 3 minutes when Washington was just everywhere in Las Vegas' zone. And in the end, Vegas gets the puck out, and next thing you know, they score an empty netter, and game's over. Game's over, 2 seconds left. It's all said and done with. So,
but if you're not a hockey fan and you have sat on the sidelines during the playoffs, peek into this series. You're missing
awesome.
out. They're going to be skating up and down. There's talent galore. There's passion, and you're going to see some exciting hockey. I would even say, look, if you just have limited time and things like that, skip the NBA Finals. It's going to be Warriors in 5 or 6, no doubt about it. I would bet the whole podcast that the Warriors are going to destroy the Cavs, and I would say that peek into the NHL. You're going to be entertained. You're going to see some great on ice action, and it's going to be amazing. Especially if the story kind of comes to fruition and Vegas does something like that for the community, it would be amazing. It would be amazing.
Great.
All right, let's take our first time out. We're going to come back. Second half of the podcast, we're going to talk about the struggling Pistons. It's been about damn near 49 days since they let go of their head coach, and they don't have a coach yet. So it's really weird, but they made a move. They added a new special advisor to Tom Gores, and it looks like they're going to set up a new organization with a president, a general manager, and a new coach, but it just might be done in an order. I mean, it might be done out of order, and everyone's going to be confused at what the hell the Pistons are doing. We're all confused, and then we'll talk about the Lions to finish off this episode 251 on the Doc and Jock podcast. Doc and Jock here for our host site, Podomatic.com. When Adam and I first started this project, we were looking for a great place to host all of our recorded audio. And thank goodness we found Podomatic. Why do we use Podomatic? Super easy. Adam and I, we engage in verbal warfare. We make fun of each other. And then we take all the great audio and upload it to our host site, Podomatic.com. We can generate quality links so that all of our supporters across the United States and even overseas can listen to us. That's how we grew this network. That's how we get the biggest guests on the podcast platform. So if you're looking to start a brand new podcast, Doc and Jock, Vito, Jason, Steve, Jerry, Gus, we're all going to recommend one host site and one host site alone for your podcast, Podomatic.com. Because you know something's wrong when the Pistons hire somebody and everybody goes, who? Former 76ers and Grizzlies executive Ed Stefanski is on board, baby. He's the new special advisor, quote unquote, for Tom Gores. And he's going to be tasked with heading up the search for the general manager and coach. So this special advisor has been part of some teams, and you go, okay, what has he done? Has he been part of consistent winners? No. Has he been somebody that we all know and is a household name that can come in and do the job right away, and we're all like, perfect? Is he part of the San Antonio tree, Golden State Warrior tree? No. He does have ties to the Pistons of the yesteryear and things like that. So, okay, great. You added somebody that knows the Pistons. But do you know how overwhelmingly tough this job is? And we hired Ed Stefanski, and the response has been just laughable. Like, who is this guy? What's this guy about? What's he going to bring to the table? This dude is going to be getting paid to make big-time decisions, and he's got cachet. He's been in the league for a long time, but does he have the ability to pick the right guys? I think you and I are going to be like, what the hell are the Pistons doing?
Yeah, dude, look, what's Arntellum doing? Why is Arntellum here? Can somebody explain to me? I thought he was the advisor to Tom Gores. Now you go out, you pick up Ed Stefanski, who, mind you, helped put together some of the worst 76er teams you've ever seen in your entire life. On top of it, helped put together some abysmal Memphis Grizzly teams. Like, we're not talking about 76ers where they were able to go into tank mode and sit there, acquire all kinds of draft picks and hit on about 55, maybe 60% of them, and are now competing in the playoffs. No. We are talking about like the 76ers before that, which led to somebody else getting hired to come in and do all of that. Like, brutal. What is Ed Stefanski know? And if you just look at the timeline of all of this, right?
Life sucks.
It does if you're a Pistons fan. So the Pistons sit there and take 2 weeks after their season ends to then let go of Stan Van Gundy. They then wait, 40-some more days after their season ends to go out and hire a guy because they were like, oh, I guess we don't know what we're doing. We still don't have a general manager, but there's all kinds of reports being leaked out about how the Pistons want to hire Dwayne Casey. So this team is lining itself up and positioning itself, at least the optics of it are, that they might hire their head coach before they ever hire a general manager. What are we talking about here? How do we run a basketball team?
Which is weird because
nobody knows, apparently.
Nobody does it this way. Nobody.
Only Tom Gores. Only Tom Gores. Well, what is he doing? Can he get his head out of his ass?
Well,
please.
When you look at it,
is that what Ed Stefanski's here for? He's going to help pull Tom Gores' head straight out of his butt. No, that's what he's there. He's going to get the baby oil lube up the shoulders and sit there and start rocking it back and forth until it slips out.
So here's the problem is that people who have looked at it have said, okay, Stefanski was brought in, and that means typically that, and it would indicate that the Pistons are targeting Dwayne Casey because there is a relationship there. So you now basically are aware that the Pistons are targeting the former Toronto Raptors head coach. And I guess I'm okay with that, but in the end, you look at it and you go, can you at least kind of put a pep in your step and make some of these decisions? Why is it taking so long to get a general manager in place? Hire a general manager, get a coach in place. Why is it, being treated with such a laissez-faire attitude when you can go out there and say, okay, we're targeting Dwayne Casey. Let's have some talks. Let's get our general manager in place. Let's get the coach in place before the draft. But you still hear names like Trajan Langdon. You hear names like Tayshaun Prince. Shane Battier's name was bantied around before he removed his name from consideration. You haven't heard names like Chauncey Billups or Isaiah Thomas, but it's just all speculation right now. There's no action taking place, and the Pistons are operating like they got all the time in the world when this is a critical time for talent evaluation. You still got Jeff Bauer handling his business, but what are the Pistons doing? What are they doing?
Exactly.
What are you doing?
And to go out there and hire one of these guys that you just named, Shane Battier, who he just removed his name, like you said, but Trajan Langdon, Tayshaun Prince, what? Maybe Chauncey Billups, out of all the former players, he seems to at least have a head on his shoulders and understand what's going on with the league right now. I have no idea what these other clowns are doing. Why wouldn't you go out and line up a set of candidates from, I don't know, Golden State, I don't know, San Antonio? Go out there and line up guys who come from a winning tree, who understand how basketball is supposed to be done and how to address and recognize players and their abilities and put a team together. I mean, this is not a prime position. I don't think anybody in the NBA wants this position right now. It has to be the very, very worst in all of the league because you've got zero money to spend on anything. You're saddled with 3 players, one who breaks down every single year, another one who has a propensity to break down every single year, and one who's a complete head case and likes to watch Nickelodeon. Good job. Good job putting this team together and trying to sell this to a general manager. So why not try to go out and grab one of these guys? I mean, you're offering crap, right? And I do get it. It's like one of like a very few jobs. The just to be a general manager of a sports team, much less in the NBA, it's very scarce, very limited. So you got that on your side. But still, you're going to go out and you're going to try to eyeball and bring in former players?
Ugh.
What are we doing here?
And then when you got Jeff Bauer running things and his contract's going to end after the draft, how motivated do you think he's going to be?
Jesus.
He's probably going to like...
This guy's like, oh, it's business as usual. Are you serious, bro? Like, I'm expecting to come into your office and you to be sipping tea or coffee with your feet on the desk and not wearing any pants. I'll be happy if you got boxer shorts on that day. Chances are you'll be roaming around in whitey tighties and have a brown streak running up the back. And I'm like, what is going on? We need to burn that chair. That's what I'm expecting when I walk into Jeff Bauer's office. Does Jeff Bauer even have an office? I mean, we discussed this before. His job was to basically answer the phones and see if Stan wants to talk to anybody. What's he doing now? Does he understand what's going on? Has he ever GM'd a basketball team before? That's the verb, GM'd. Yeah, I just made it up. Let's just roll with it. I'm in a flow right now. Seems pretty good. I mean, honestly, what has this guy done? Jeff Bauer sucks at his job. Ed Stefanski sucks at his job. Do you realize? I'm gonna name some timelines here. The Toronto Raptors from 2011 to 2013. The Philadelphia 76ers from 2007 to 2011. Also managing the recent incarnation of the New Jersey Nets. What do all of these teams have in common? They all sucked. During these time periods I just gave you, all those teams sucked. And you know who was at the head of all those teams? Stefanski. Sweet. So if you're a Pistons fan, hopefully you like sucking, because that's all we're going to get going forward. This is going to be awful. Awful. And you've got nothing to help rebuild this team, nothing to get you out of here, because you're just crushed with ridiculous salaries for 3 of your guys, and 2 of them like to be injured, and the other one likes 12-year-olds on Nickelodeon because he's a weirdo. And then, I'm so frustrated right now. Sorry, John.
No, it's okay. It's one of those things where we're looking at the Pistons. Nobody's satisfied. They're a dormant franchise. Nobody believes in the ownership. People are confused as to what moves they're making, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you get if they do go backwards and they just hired Dwayne Casey before the general manager, would you be okay with Dwayne Casey as a stopgap for 2 or 3 years?
Does Dwayne Casey want to come in here?
I would take a job. I mean, there's only 2 right now. I think it's the Pacers and the Pistons.
Yeah.
I mean,
would you rather go coach the Pacers? I would. I mean, at least they've got a little bit of cap room and they've got some draft picks. You've got nothing. And I would probably be okay with Dwayne Casey, okay? I don't think he'd be a bad coach. I really don't. The biggest issue I would have with the selection of Dwayne Casey right now would be that Ed Stefanski would probably be the guy making that call, because I don't trust him, because I've seen what he's done in the past, and I don't like what he's done in the past. I have zero hope for his evaluations on talent. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't like what he's done as far as his coaching hires in the past. I don't think they've been great. Dwayne Casey, I think, could be a very good coach. I think he could work here. I don't know, though. If you did do this backwards, and you did do this in the inverse order that most good normal franchises do things, which it looks like we might be tracking in that direction, does that GM then want Dwayne Casey? I mean, you kind of limit yourself. You could have the absolute perfect candidate, but he comes in, he sits down, and he's like, look, Dwayne Casey doesn't really fit what I want to do in the vision I have for this team, especially with you having guys like Reggie Jackson, Blake Griffin, and Andre Drummond under contract for the next couple years, and us being kind of pigeonholed with a limited draft resources and money. So I've got a vision for this team, but Dwayne Casey's approach and philosophy to this team doesn't really mesh with what I want to do, so that's not going to really work. You're going to let that guy go The guy who has a vision for your team, who can sit there and salvage what you have because you want to go hire Dwayne Casey as your head coach? Does that make sense to anybody? I mean, I feel like I'm talking to a wall here. Like, it makes zero sense to do it this way. And I'm not saying that the Pistons are going to do it this way, but it just feels like this is the direction we're tracking in because it's been almost a month and a half now, and we still have, maybe almost 2 months, and we still have no general manager for this team. Mind you, the Combine's right around the corner, and you've got your old general manager whose job was to get coffee, give foot rubs, and answer the telephone for Stan Van Gundy, running everything right now. He's the guy who's your talent evaluator. None of this makes sense. This is Bizarro World. That's what's going on here. The Pistons are an abysmal organization. Ever since Tom Gores has taken over, this has been atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. If you wanted to sit there and you just wanted to, I don't know, go in half-assed, go hire Chauncey Billups. Go hire him. I don't even know if he would take this job because he realizes how bad it is. He'd probably be like, you know what? I don't want this, man, because you got nothing for me to do here. My first year and a half, I'm just kind of sitting around twiddling my thumbs because I can't go out and get any free agents. I can't go out there and draft anybody. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing?
So is there a ridiculous notion, you know what I saw on Twitter, and some people are actually saying it, is that, look, back in 2010, I tweeted out on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast what the roster for the Pistons looked like. It's an embarrassment to see what that roster looked like. You had Jason Maxiell and things like that. That's when the decision happened.
J-Max.
You didn't get a chance to get LeBron then. Okay, now you've gone out and you say, well, let's just kind of play revisionist history. Why would Tom Gores bring in Blake Griffin? Why not in the name of public opinion? Maybe if like, look, you put out feelers, LeBron ain't coming here.
Right.
He's going to set up shop in L.A., Philly, Boston, wherever he ends up going. You know that. Okay, fine. But in the name of PR, don't you just come out and say, look, there's a fine-ass basketball player that's playing in Cleveland, and he should come to another Midwest team. He should come to the Pistons and put on a whole display, put up billboards, just make it look like you want the baddest man on the planet to come here.
You could totally sell. You could totally sell.
Sell that.
You could totally sell LeBron coming to Detroit to LeBron.
Exactly.
You know how?
How?
You say, hey, LeBron, I know you hate Dan Gilbert. Why don't you come to Detroit and stick it to Dan Gilbert?
Yes.
You do realize he owns half the city, him and Mike Ilitch, right?
Exactly.
Come here and stick it to him on a night-in, night-out basis. On top of it, you're going to make Detroit that much better than Cleveland.
Why, pin your hopes on a guy like Blake Griffin? How could you do that? So I would even be willing, if you could, pay the luxury tax.
Marital affairs. I don't know.
Pay the man. Figure out a way, even if you have to, give him ownership of the team. 30% ownership. Give him ownership. Make a plea. Look,
he's been general manager.
Look,
he's doing it in Cleveland.
Some people even on our Twitter page mentioned, let LeBron be the coach. Let LeBron be the player coach and come in and handle his business. I would say just
It'd be like Slapshot.
Yeah, in the name of public relations, just bring the man here. I feel like it seems like in terms of Detroit, a lot of fans like LeBron. They saw what he did. He was able to score that 25 points straight in the series in which the Pistons were knocked out by the Cavs. And so they saw that. They have respect for a man that's taken his team to the NBA Finals. But I would ask, if he came here, would he be washed up? Would he be good here? Would he be viewed as a has-been? Or would you say, look, even if LeBron took them to the second round, it's progress from where they've been. Even if he kind of instills something in these guys, even if you brought him here and sent Blake to the bench, imagine Blake Griffin coming in as a sixth man. You have LeBron James here. He can do some things. And I think LeBron James with Andre Drummond, that could be a big two. That could be serious. That could be something that could be done. I think he could come in here and save the franchise if you made that move. And I don't even think people would be upset about it. You get a 34-year-old LeBron James. You maybe max him out for 2 years and you see what you're able to do. Maybe you make one more run while he instills things that you would like in the program. It's probably not going to happen, but why didn't the Pistons sell it? I think you need something to sell. And if he were to come here, I do think he would at least get him maybe to the Eastern Conference Finals, go up against Boston and handle your business.
Can we both agree right now, LeBron James is the best player in the NBA, right? I think we can all agree on that. If you want to go all time, we can discuss that, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Right now, LeBron James is the best player in the NBA and has been for quite some time. He is taking a Cleveland Cavaliers team that has really and truly nothing around him to the finals yet again. You can say that he's got Kevin Love. What has Kevin Love done lately? You got guys coming off the bench, guys like Kyle Korver, I believe are in their starting lineup, and you're getting production from a guy like Kyle Korver, and that's what's helping this team along. LeBron James is the best player in the NBA currently. If he was to come to this team over the next, we'll say he signs a 2 or 3 year contract, he would still be the best player in the NBA, and I think he would take this team to an NBA Finals. I don't know if he'd win it because Golden State's got a really good team, and depending on what Houston ends up doing, they can add a few more pieces. I think Houston's got a really good team. So I don't know if he wins another NBA championship if he was to come to the Pistons, but I think you at least get to the finals. I mean, Boston's got a really good squad, but LeBron James seems to be everybody in the East's kryptonite. He just crushes them. I don't think he'd be a has-been. I don't think he'd be washed up. I think he would come here, and I think the fans would rejoice.
Yeah, and I think right now the perception is that Tom Gores is treating this like a business and that he's not serious about winning. That's the biggest problem you have. Yeah. When perception starts to creep in like that, you got a big problem because then people are not going to believe your seriousness. People are not going to respect what Tom Gores is doing and the way in which the Pistons are being run. It just seems like they're doing everything incorrectly, and that's why a lot of fans are turned off. That's why you see on sports shows people just laughing when you hear the name Ed Stefanski brought up, and you can't have that. It's just right now, even the weird part is people that are paid to talk about the Pistons are negative towards them. It's just they need something of a spark positive, and Blake Griffin wasn't it. The combination of Andre and Reggie, whenever you bring them up, everyone tweets us, get them out of here. I mean, he can't even post videos on his Instagram of himself shooting. People are like, oh, what's this guy doing? Yeah. There's no positivity, so you got to blow this thing up to the highest of heavens and start over with hopefully people that know what they're doing. But it just seems like the Pistons are probably the furthest organization away from competitiveness because they don't seem to acknowledge the fact that they probably should tank. They won't acknowledge it, and I think they are the organization that's the farthest away, farther than the Red Wings, right? I think you can acknowledge. I think the Pistons are farther away from championship medal than the Red Wings.
At least the Red Wings know who their general manager is. We might not like it, but at least we know who the hell it is.
All right, so the Pistons can't even sell hope. They can't even try to make a plea for the best player in the world. But anyways, real quickly, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion, right? Golden State, 5-6 games.
Yeah.
I don't see it. Great accomplishment.
6 maybe.
Yeah, we're not going to get into LeBron versus Jordan. We just think it's a great accomplishment for LeBron to get his team to the finals. It was disappointing on Boston's end, but in the end, I do think the Warriors are going to mop up. I mean, that roster to go in and play a 7-game series versus what the Golden State Warriors have, you're just going to take LeBron scoring on average of 40 points a night to get anywhere near close to 3 wins. I just don't see it happening. I say Warriors in 6. Some people have it as early as 4 or 5, but we shall see. All right, stay with us. One final segment. Got to talk about the Detroit Lions. Some things we can get into in terms of rankings, and the defensive coordinator finally spoke to the media, the kickoff rules, and things like that. We'll talk about football next here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I just want to thank everybody for your continued support. We wouldn't have been able to grow this network. We wouldn't be able to get all the great guests that call in or visit us in studio without your support. Free and easy way to support the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Go visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. You can go take care of all your online shopping needs, buy tickets to any sporting event in town. You can see what show airs on this network at what time. You can see the pictures of the great guests that have come in and visited with us and have been part of the exclusive one-on-one podcast. Thank you so much for helping us keep the microphones hot, the studio lights on here in our Sterling Heights studio. We wouldn't be able to do it without your support. We greatly appreciate it. Keep it going. We love seeing the increased numbers of downloads, the increased subscribers via iTunes. Thank you so much. It's greatly appreciated, and we always respect those that support the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. So, Cuz, have you been picking into the Detroit Lions? I know it's OTAs. You had a chance to hear Matt Patricia kind of talking about where they're at and things like that, kind of looking at some running back position battles, things like that. But at this point in time in the offseason, it's just kind of getting acclimated. You're hearing about Matthew Stafford and his relationship with Patricia. You're seeing who's been on the field, who's getting a lot of the reps. But a lot of people say, look, at this point in time in the season, you just go and you want to see who's participating. You want to kind of get an early look at the squad and things like that. So not a whole heck of a lot of news and things like that. But people are talking about Darius Slay, his accomplishment landing in the top 50 in the NFL, being ranked 49th by his peers and things like that. You're seeing kind of quotes from Matthew Stafford talking about how often he's communicating and things like that. You're seeing, discussion about the rule changes, and we'll talk about quickly, the fact that the NFL made a rule that, kind of has upset the majority of the players, I think, in terms of the anthem and things like that. But in terms of what's going on now with the Detroit Lions, it's good to kind of peek in to see where things are going and things like that. What has piqued your interest so far this offseason?
The development of Ragnow, it doesn't look like they're going to play him at center.
Isn't that weird?
Which
yeah.
blows my mind why you would waste a draft pick on a guy who's going to play guard for you. I don't know. We both agreed that they needed to address that defense, and they neglected to really do that with this draft. And you added a whole bunch of linebackers during free agency, which is cool, but you didn't go out there, you didn't get a guy who's going to line up opposite Ziggy Ansah or a guy who's going to take over when Ziggy Ansah leaves. So it feels almost like history's going to repeat itself here, where you could have had Aaron Donald and you end up watching Ndamukong Suh leave, and then you've got nobody to really fill that void. So watching, I guess, Ragnow's ability to kind of come through here and start to I guess, blossom as a guard is interesting to me. Also, the running backs are interesting. It does look like Kerryon Johnson is going to be your featured back, which I think is a good thing. And I think we can both agree that if this running game gets going, it has a lot to do with Kerryon Johnson, and it will have a lot to do with Ragnow. And I know I just bashed Ragnow, so maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, but that offensive line has to get better. It has to be good for this running game to be decent, So if you can get this running game going and you can get things kind of firing on all cylinders, this is what's going to get this team propelled in the right direction. It's going to help you when you got a lead. It's going to help you milk time off the clock and help you secure victories, which is awesome. But really and truly, it's that offensive line and that running back combination that I've been really paying a lot of attention to right now.
Now, a couple quick hitters, quick notes that we observed in the last 7 days. What do you make of the new kickoff rules? That's been the talk of everybody around town, just kind of going, okay, does it look like that the kickoff is going to be abolished? How is this going to play into the new NFL? And then two, obviously, what was your take when you heard the news about the way the NFL kind of mandated a rule, which is, hey, you players are going to be either standing on the field, or if you choose, you'll have no problems if you stay in the locker room. And so people were kind of debating back and forth in the last 7 days. It became a white hot topic issue, and people have said, well, you kind of have verbalized with the way this was worded that those that are standing there must respect the flag, which kind of leads people to interpret that those that were kneeling and protesting were disrespecting the flag. And so it has kind of come to fruition. They have stamped a new rule. What did you make of it?
Let's first talk about the national anthem rule. I think the NFL was really short-sighted in what they've done. And I think they lifted the curtain and showed you where their loyalties lie.
With the dollar.
It's with the dollar. It doesn't necessarily matter what it is that you want to do. If you go back in history, players didn't stand on the sidelines for the national anthem. They were in the locker room. Up until 1992, when the NFL realized that they could monetize this, have the players come out, stand for the national anthem, get some money with the Army, the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force coming in and sending things in. I think it's really short-sighted by the NFL to go ahead and enact this and tell players, look, either you're going to stand on the sidelines or you can sit inside the locker room, but we're not going to have you on the field. I just think it's in poor taste. I don't think it does anything to help solve the bigger issue and what the protest was about. It wasn't about the flag. It's never been about the flag. It's never been about the red, white, or blue. It's always been about social injustice. At some point,
will this continue to be an issue?
Yeah, because the players are upset about it, and the players are trying to figure out a way to sit there and either address it or skirt it or somehow continue their protest because there is a bigger issue going on socially. And the thing that really frustrates me with all of this is Colin Kaepernick took that knee to bring light to something else. It wasn't to say, hey, screw you, America. That was never the issue. It was, hey, there's social injustice going on. We've got police beating citizens. We've got people shooting each other. Hey, hey, Brenda's throwing a baby in a garbage can. I mean, shoot, you can take it all the way back to Tupac if you want. Let's discuss it here. And his whole thing was, this is what's going on. We need to talk about this. And instead, everybody was like, oh, no. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about why you're a POS and why you're taking a knee and not standing for the American flag and for the national anthem. Like, wait, what? That wasn't what this was all about. This had nothing to do with any of that. It was about raising awareness for this. And, like, the awareness was raised for, like, a week. And then all the attention got diverted for the last year and a half 2 years on Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. It's really kind of frustrating to me, and I think the NFL has a deaf ear when it comes to this type of thing, which is abysmal. Now let's transition over to something else that's abysmal. See that? Segue. The kickoff. You're taking one of the most impactful and can be exciting play out of play in the NFL. Now, these new rules for the kickoff, the kicking team will no longer get a running start, so all players have to line up on the line, and you're going to be no more than 5 yards from the ball. Or the previous rules that you could line up no more than 5 yards from the ball. So now you're like right up on the line with the ball. The kicking team must have 5 players on each side of the ball instead of being able to overload one side. At least 2 players must be lined up outside the yard line numbers of the field, so at the very, very far end. And then you have to have at least 2 players line up inside the hash marks. So now you're basically spreading everybody out and spreading everybody thin. At least 8 players on the return team must be in the 15-yard setup zone prior to the kickoff. Only 3 can remain outside that zone. It's just you can't do any more wedge blocking. That's been gone for a while now. What they're trying to do is limit the impact that the kicking team will make with the returner. And I get that. And it's all in, like we were talking about earlier, it's all about CTE and preventing the concussions, and I get all of it. But you're really hampering the way this game, like, football's not going to look like football.
Yeah.
The way we grew up with it in like 5 years. At some point, they're going to get rid of this. They've if you go back and you look at what they've done the last 5 years to this point, they've modified these rules so much. Like, the kickoff is no longer what we grew up with. And in, I think, another 3 years, it'll be completely gone. And then at some point, they're going to get rid of the punt. So it's going to be like backyard football. You know what I'm saying? You get 4 downs to get your first down. And if you don't get your first down, wherever you turn the ball over, that's where the other team takes over. Do you know what I'm saying? Kickers are going to be completely gone from this team. It's just the direction they're heading. And I think it's short-sighted. You know, kickers are really important to your team. And what they provide, you know, you're flipping the field. It's all about field position. And if you can get a kicker who can sit there and boot the ball down and get it to land on the 1 yard line, and you can get guys streaking down there who terrify your kick returner, why the hell not, man?
Gotcha.
Why not? You know?
Understood. It's just, how much tweaking can you do to a game that's pretty much a violent game? It's tough because the fabric of the game and what made it popular was the hitting, the dick butt kiss, the violence of the sport. And you got to have that delicate balance of being able to legislate and keep the players healthy versus letting us watch the game that we all love.
Right.
Please, you know what I mean? But in the end, I do think that right now football still has a core audience, big money, and then I think they lucked out too because of the fact that, guess what happened? Gambling's legal.
Right.
So they got a little bit of an infusion, maybe a stay of execution in terms of declining ratings and things like that. I think the ratings are going to see a little bit of a spike with gambling and things like that. You might see a little bit of a reprieve from some decline in ratings and things like that, especially with the rule that you talked about. If they have it set up where that's not a topic anymore and they just take care of it, then maybe they'll get back on track and we can continue to love the sport that we all love. Now, getting back to the Lions, Darius Slay, honored, ranked 49th by the players, by his peers, in terms of the top 100 NFL players. And I think he is growing respect in that locker room. The season that he had in 2017 was definitely pretty good. And you say, okay, if Darius Slay can be the anchor of that secondary, with growth and with learning from Matt Patricia, you have an opportunity. Maybe he can become the next Malcolm Butler and make big plays when it counts in the grandest stage. And you hope that for Darius Slay, but I think he deserved the ranking. I feel like that's pretty good. And I think that probably the only other line is probably going to show up on this list is somewhere in between, I think I said 19 or I think in the top 20. I think Matthew Stafford deserves to be in there.
Matt Stafford's top 20?
Yeah, I think so. I think he deserves to be in the top 20 just based on what he's done and the respect that he has among the peers. Now, if it was
I think
a
Darius
vote,
Slay totally deserves this, by the way.
Yeah.
Because he's damn near a lockdown corner on this team. He takes all the biggest wide receivers, whatever the opposition is.
if you told me the vote was from the media, I think Stafford might come down a little bit from 20 to 40. But from his peers, I think a lot of people look at
Yes.
Matthew Stafford and say, that dude's got an arm. I mean, you get glowing reviews on a lot of national programs. So I would say probably look around 18, 19, 20 for Matt Stafford.
See, I thought Stafford would definitely be a top 25, so we're right in the same ballpark, which is cool. Do you see any other Lions possibly making the top 40? A guy like maybe a Golden Tate, maybe a Glover Quinn. I mean, both these guys have big, impactful years last year. And this is going to sound kind of funny, and I don't know if these guys ever make this list because I think sometimes they're overlooked. But what about our beloved kicker here for Detroit? What about Matt Prater?
Matt Prater.
Look at what Matt Prater did last year.
Showing some kicker love, huh?
I'm just saying, look at what Matt Prater did last year.
Okay.
How many field goals from 50 yards? How consistent was that guy?
Give Prater some love.
How many games did that guy help you win?
Give him some love. Why not?
I'm just saying, you could make a case that Matt Prater should be
39.
Sure. Why the hell not?
Top 40, right?
Sure. Why the hell not?
Scoring
Do you know
threat.
what I'm saying?
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
He was able to do things, and he was able to account for a ton of points and a ton of victories for this team. So you could make a case, but again, it's a kicker. Kickers are often overlooked. So I think that Matt Prater is a viable candidate to make the top 40 somewhere. Now, that being said, I don't know if he should be placed ahead of a guy like Darius Slay, who's out there every single play that team's on defense. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or Matt Stafford. There's no way he should be ranked higher than Matt Stafford because Matt Stafford is the guy who has the ball in his hand every offensive play. So I just think there could be a case for those guys in particular. A guy like Golden Tate, who I think led the league, if not leading the league. He was in the top 3 of yards after catch. Glover Quinn, who had another really impactful year. I think he led the team in interceptions. Also, I can argue with you that he was the quarterback of that defense. And Matt Prater, who's been nothing but consistent since the Lions have picked him up and brought him back from rehab.
Yeah. So everyone's going to be looking at the defense. Defensive coordinator is going to be calling plays for the first time in a long while. Pasqualoni spoke to the media. Kind of people were looking at some comments that he made. People are looking at, okay, Jim Bob Cooter, the assistants. They're saying, okay, if they can improve a little bit and get the schematics right, and that offense can take a step forward, that defense can take a step forward, then the Lions can get off to a good start because it's going to be very important. That schedule. When we start chomping our teeth and really digging into it, that early part of that schedule is so important. You can't lose games to the Jets and the Niners.
No.
You start off incorrect there and you go 0-2, your season is fucked because you're going to have a big-time problem catching up those wins when you get to Green Bay and other teams like that. So I think that if you get off to a good start, then you have a real good opportunity to kick this season off on right foot because the big range of emotions that we could have. It could be a 4-win year 1 for Patricia, or it could be a 12-win year. That's the crazy part about it.
I'm glad you bring this up. Would it be acceptable if Matt Patricia does have a 4-win year or anything less than 9 wins? You have to remember, he came in and he took over a team that went 9-7 last year. And that was because Bob Quinn said 9-7 isn't acceptable. It's not good enough. You had a head coach here who consistently won you at least 9 games, and that wasn't good enough. How does Matt Patricia then come in here and we'll say only wins you 8, goes 8-8? I don't think you can turn around and point to the schedule and say, well, we had a really tough schedule. Okay, cool, bro. You addressed your offensive line. You added the running back that you thought was that missing piece. Yeah, your defensive scheme is totally different, but you have a defensive guru as the head coach. He's the guy who's supposed to take you to that next level because legitimately he's a rocket scientist and he can fit round pegs in square holes all day long. How can you turn around and sell to the media if you're Bob Quinn, or sell to these guys who are lining up every single Sunday for you that 8-8 is going to be okay? I don't know if you can do it. And I think the fan base itself would be upset by it. I mean, I listen to a lot of sports talk radio. Mm-hmm. I work for a sports talk station. It's very small, but I still work for one. And we discuss these things all the time. Brian from Detroit calls all the time. And he says, look, if they go 8-8, it's unacceptable. And I think he's got a point.
Yeah,
I think he's right.
Because people do believe, and the notion was you fired a coach that was winning 9 games consistently, but wasn't getting to the postseason. So the thinking and the perception is you brought in a guy to take the next step, not to go backwards.
Right.
And this fan base is so starved that they cannot tolerate another year without the postseason. They cannot tolerate a season in which you don't see progress. Because here's the thing. The clock is ticking on Matthew Stafford. You don't get him forever. You're not going to get him for another 50 years. You got basically a 6-year window, and it starts now. The clock is ticking, tick-tock, tick-tock. And seasons that are wasted where they don't involve the postseason, some would argue. And the argument's going to be made, you'll hear it from Brian in Detroit, you might hear it from Doc in Sterling Heights, that why did you potentially let go of Jim Caldwell when you potentially maybe hired a guy that could also bring a black cloud over your entire organization? And so it might be said, it might be talked about that, well, you guys wanted Jim Caldwell gone. Well, I did too, but I'll backtrack and you'll never know. But I'll say, well, I'll throw out the other argument, which is you had a coach that was kind of building something. They were winning games. You might have, allowed him to stay, and it could have been a fruitful thing, but you went and got your boy.
Let me ask you this. So I think we both agree, especially over our time watching Jim Caldwell as the head coach. In game,
terrible.
He wasn't very good.
No, he wasn't going to get you the job done.
And he cost you. He probably cost you a couple games every single season.
No, we have to acknowledge
we both agree that
he had supporters, which is really surprising.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think as a man, he was awesome, and I think that locker room really respected him, which was great. You needed that. I think a lot of guys lost a lot of respect for a guy like Jim Schwartz prior to that. So having a guy in there, a figurehead that you respect and that you listen to, I think was important for this team at that time. But I think we both agree that in game, he wasn't going to help win you a game. Do you think Matt Patricia can come in, and we'll just say, we're looking at the schedule, looking at this roster, we'll say this team maybe wins 6 games. Is Matt Patricia so smart and such a good in-game head coach that he is accountable for another 3 victories for this team?
I think it could be. I think that in terms of what a system in place defensively could do, if you're more opportunistic, if you have a really solid bend-don't-break defense and you put more pressure on the opposing quarterback, you get more turnovers, I think a scheme can definitely help you win 2 or 3 more games. And definitely, I think that that's what you brought him here for, is that
not just a scheme, though. Not just scheme. I think a scheme is important, and being able to run that is important, but not just a scheme. Being able to manage the
in-game decisions,
yes,
using timeouts properly.
Exactly.
Yes, I think he can account for maybe you can say 2 games.
2 games?
Yeah, okay. So that's why I think 8-8 might be the number that people don't like to hear, but it's a good starting point. But I am going 10-6.
But you know what though? I think I could take 8-8 if he's the reason that you win 2 of those games, because you're going from a head coach who at times would cost you a game, 2 games, 3 games. I think all of us sitting around, we could sit there and we could just shout out games that Jim Caldwell cost you. Do you know what I'm saying? You know, the game against Seattle, Jim Caldwell. You know, the game against Green Bay. I mean, right there, 2 right off the top of my head. Those are 2 games that I think that a guy like Matt Patricia, and we won't know until this first season's over, but I think a guy like Matt Patricia won't cost you.
Very good podcast, sir. Always enjoy our conversations. 251 in the books. A great episode. Lots to get into. Final series, NHL, NBA, we got the Detroit Lions, we got the Pistons, we got the Wings in their offseason. We're always peeking into the Detroit Tigers. Always good stuff to talk about in the world of Detroit sports. Just turn on the microphones, and Doc and Jock, we're ready to deliver. Thank you so much for finding us. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts can be downloaded. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. See everybody next Thursday.
This was locker room talk.
Second dick.
Sorry, Detroit. It didn't quite work out.
And all I can say is Detroit Sports Podcast scores.
I hear voices in my head. They counsel me. They understand. They talk to me.